Okay, so let me take a second to just introduce myself for those who don't know me. I am Lawrence Myers, and I'm in year, what is it, 5 at ASD. And I am officially the service learning coordinator at the school. So there's nothing about sustainability in my title. But when I was hired, I was given kind of the task of potentially bringing sustainability in as a piece of our ethos building, so to speak, because my previous job was sustainability and service learning coordinator at the school where I was before, which was the International School of Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And so when I came in, of course, service learning is a very distinct kind of form of learning and instructional methodology. And really sustainability, what we're finding is that it kind of provides the context often, especially in a school where we're quite bubbled, so to speak. And it's really hard to find service-specific opportunities external to the school. So really for us, it was almost a practical thing to do to move in a direction towards sustainability. But of course, there's always the big kind of why out there. So before I start, I'm hoping that you have access to an actual computer that is a little bit interactive. I don't know if you're on your phones or whatever. I'm going to copy 3 links for you. And I would like you to all at least have access to, ooh, that's not the one. Okay. Ooh. Of course, it doesn't take long for technology to start getting in the way. All right, here we go. Give me just a second and I will get my links and share them with you in just a moment. So I will need this one. I had them all nicely copied and pasted earlier. And of course now they're no longer that way. So I just shared something called a Menti. And if you can all just click on that Menti and hopefully it'll open up to an actual page that asks you a question. Can everyone just kind of confirm that that's what you see? Maybe just give me a thumbs up so we know. And okay, and so this is kind of the beginning of our conversation today. I'm hoping that as I share my screen, I will be able to share the results as you input them. So let me do that for just a second and hopefully it'll work itself out. All right, so what we're asking for you to do, sustainability, I think often needs to start from the personal. So what is important to the people at the table? And since you are all at the table today, we wanted to invite you to actually participate in this. So there will be 2 slides that you're asked to kind of involve yourself with. The first one just talks about 3 core values. So if you have any personal core values, and I put the school's core values there, they certainly don't need to be yours. But if you personally have core values, I think it's important to kind of throw them on the table. So if you don't mind filling those kind of 3 categories out with a personal core value, take a moment to think about it and just put those in there. And then what I'm going to do is share my screen and hopefully it'll work itself out. And you can see what I'm seeing and then we move on from there. So can everybody see my screen now? Okay, so I believe, I hope this is true. Okay, there should be, oh, tech. Give me just a second. Okay, it has asked you for 3 words, correct? Sorry, give me just a second here. I'm not sure why. Let's remove that for a second and then present. Would that work? Are you inputting the words? Because maybe with just this small, are you seeing anything? Maybe I need to scrap this.
Putting in the words.
It was going to work so beautifully, and now, of course,
submit yet. So I think that's why you can't see it.
Okay, so if you can submit, oh, there we are. Okay, all right. I was wondering where it went. Okay, so as you start submitting, my screen will show more and more words, and so essentially, this is just a way of bringing us together as a small little community to essentially figure out what is important to us. And how that those values and what we feel is important might actually be kind of the seed, so to speak, for a conversation about sustainability. So I see here we've got empathy, we've got honesty, we've got compassion, Compassion is a little bit bigger, so perhaps more than one person has written that. Dependability, responsibility, integrity, impact. So those are all really, really nice, powerful kind of statements. And I think it's important that we realize when we're talking about the school that we're looking at it not only through the school's core values, which I think are important, but the totality of our core values. I coach basketball, and sometimes when I coach basketball, the kids come in, and there's the typical conversation about there's no I in team. But I typically explain to the kids, well, that's not really true. The reality is there are a lot of eyes in the team, and you have to make sure that all the eyes are understanding and working together with each other. So we have environment here, which is great as well. So the eyes are just as important as the team. It's not only the team, and I've got to sacrifice everything I ever stand for so that I can be on that team. So it's the same thing here. If we're a team as a small group, a team as a larger community, we also have a lot of eyes, a lot of individuals in that community that I think are important to pay attention to. All right, so let me go. I don't know if you are all on the next kind of page for the what is the sustainability piece. And let me also maybe take that picture off. I'm noticing that the pictures might be getting in the way. And take a moment just for a second. I know that you're not experts in sustainability by any stretch, but the idea would be if you were to define sustainability right now, what would you say? What would it be? Don't worry about being right or wrong or anything like that. We're simply sharing thoughts at the moment and trying to put ourselves kind of in that mind space, so to speak, about sustainability so that we can get sort of a starting point. And I hope they will show here. So if anyone's done and you've pressed, there we go. Okay. All right, at least some up, which is nice for me. So I'll give you maybe another minute or so. Again, don't stress. It's a first draft. It's a quick thoughts. So we have so far using the resources for only one Earth, and we have energy saving. Is there anyone else who would like to press submit and just give us your thoughts? I can't see who you are, so don't worry about being known. Okay, there we go. So finding a way to exist without causing damage to the Earth. So more of an existential kind of approach, and behaviors and actions that we take today that are done in a way that ensures sufficient resources for those who come after us. And so that gives it kind of a generational kind of perspective and the longevity of it. And then using resources responsibly and mindfully. Okay, so there's a lot of responsibility there. There's talk of resources in one way or another. And there's also talk about, I guess, a collective responsibility to a future, potentially our own children, potentially people who have not been born yet, and hopefully, the natural world as well. So responsibility comes out a lot to me in these particular statements, and I hope that you found a little bit of a connection. Hold on, let me stop sharing for a second. I hope that you found a little bit of a connection between your own core values and those statements about sustainability, because I think really it's important to recognize that we have those connections. And of course, the computer just threw me out of, sorry, just a second. I don't know why I'm having so many troubles here today. Here we go. Okay, so let me share my screen once again, and then we'll do a little bit of an activity in just a second, and we'll go from there. So everybody can hear me, I'm hoping. And all right, so just very quickly, this session is essentially about recognizing that sustainability is probably bigger than just a single facet of life. And a couple of you were talking about that, kind of the totality of behaviors and opportunities and what we do and how it impacts things. We'll talk very briefly about the Sustainable Development Goals and what that is and how they relate to what we do. And also we'll talk a little bit more, which is really my outcome today, is to find and identify kind of leverage points and thinking about sustainability specifically to our school. And this might link in nicely potentially to using some of this information for you personally as well. So I'm hoping we'll get out of that. Okay, so I have a little game for you all. I need your screens on. So if you're in a screen off situation right now, I need you to switch that real quick. And the game is the following. You have your screen on, and I will give you 3 statements. This is a get to know you kind of activity, just very quickly. If you feel that the statement applies to you, you need to come forward like really, really, really close to the screen if you think that it really applies greatly. And if you think that no way it completely doesn't apply, then you move all the way back. All right, and all we're watching is people moving back and forth on the screen so we can tell a little bit about you. All right, again, it's nothing too stressful, I hope. But statement number 1, I woke up optimistic today. Right, so again, kind of move yourself forward or backward depending on how you feel. It's not quite a stretch, but let's call it a stretch. Statement number 2, I think my children's future is bright. Right, and hopefully we have some optimistic people here, but you never know. It depends on your outlook and certainly how you woke up today. Statement number 3, I have the capacity to make positive change. And that's where kind of I put myself right up at the front because I do think that most of us, if not all of us, have a supreme and perfectly leveraged capacity to make change, at the very least in our personal lives, if not kind of on a world scale. All right, thank you so much. So we just did the Menti. I'm going to jump right through that for a second. And I'm going to talk very briefly about sustainability kind of as we see it. So the school has a sustainability statement. And it goes something like this. I hope you don't mind if I read it real quick. The American School of Dubai encourages sustainable habits and innovative change by spreading awareness and taking informed action to improve the present and future of our community. So this took about 4 months to put together by a group of students who were running back and forth from student government groups to the school's cabinet, which is the upper administration, and back again, and trying to get the words just right. And being part of those conversations, what was very important to the kids was the word innovative, because they wanted to make sure that we were kind of cutting edge, so to speak, at least in Dubai, that we were trying new things. We weren't just doing what everyone else was always doing. The second piece was that it wasn't just the spreading of awareness, but it was actually taking action that was important. And that, of course, goes hand in hand with the innovative change piece. And the third conversation that was pretty heavy was, are we just talking about the future or are we also talking about the present? And I think the recognition of the kids was, maybe we're done talking purely about the future. Maybe sustainability is something that now needs to be discussed about the here and now. And so we're not just talking about 20 years down the road. We're not just talking about 50 years down the road. We're actually discussing the here and now and how can we actually affect our own communities and of course the world through that. So it's a pretty powerful statement, and I think the kids did a really, really good job of kind of visioning and being forward thinking and positive while also recognizing kind of the complexity of the situation as well. All right, so as far as sustainability goes from my angle, all right, I have grown up, and this is quite similar to what one of you actually said. So the idea is that sustainability is all about making sure that we're able to meet our basic needs, which in this particular graph is written by the not enough piece, right? So we need to have enough food, enough water, enough safety, enough resources, enough sense of purpose, enough family connection, whatever that might be. And that is kind of the lowest limit of that. And then, of course, you get to the point of too much. And typically when we talk about too much, we're discussing things like a consumer reality. How much do we really need? Do we need to buy that extra thing? And if we're buying that extra thing, does it need to be a single use thing, or can we get something that's going to stick around for a while? And somewhere in there, we kind of go up and down as as a family, as a community, and as a world. Sometimes you move closer to the not enough and you start stressing. Other times you move closer to the too much and you start having kind of reflective thoughts about what is it that I need to do to kind of help myself out. So we are here today really to talk about how can we as a community maybe move away from that too much piece, recognizing that of course there is a bottom limit to this. We have certain needs as a community that we need to kind of maintain. So back in 2015, the United Nations adopted something called the Sustainable Development Goals. And they are 17 goals that focus on kind of smaller pieces of the bigger puzzle, so to speak. So you'll notice here on the screen, there's no poverty. There's things like decent work and economic growth. There are things like climate action, quality education. So the truth is, some of these things are not typical of things you might think about when you hear the word sustainability. So sustainability, we often go to the environment and we think somehow it's an environmental benefit. But the truth is, if we have people living in poverty, that is unsustainable as well. All right, it's only a matter of time before the human system breaks down because there are too many people in poverty. If there are people that are uneducated, that will of course affect that kind of bottom line. We need a certain amount of education so we have, decent interactions between people, potential positive work opportunities, things along those lines. And of course, health and well-being, I think it goes without saying that if we're not healthy, as we all know with this COVID crisis right now, we can't actually perform to the best of our ability. So having COVID as a never-ending reality is potentially detrimental to sustainability as we know it. And so we're not necessarily even talking about the environment at all. We're talking purely about that goal number 3 in this particular case. So all of these goals have kind of been put there to recognize that there are multiple facets. So we might be a school, so more directly involved in that number 4 category, but things we do affect the other things. And the truth is, in reality, this is more kind of what it looks like, right? Things are interrelated. One thing will affect another. So if I, for example, kill all the fish in the ocean, that will affect fishing communities directly who now don't have work, right? So now they don't have decent work and economic growth. So what happens? They might need to move, for example, or they might have issues of violence or crime or all those kind of things, which takes us to number 16, peace and justice. So one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, and it's all really directly related. And so even if I'm kind of just a climate activist, let's say, and that's my thing, the truth is by supporting the climate, I'm actually supporting everything else as well. It's all related. So my work on the climate and someone else's work on clean water, all of those go together. And what we want basically is to find our little niche and to make sure that that niche is as positive as possible, recognizing the core values we all just talked about: empathy, responsibility, being good to each other, and the environment, things like that. So everybody's got their thing. And the idea is that we take those things and we make sure that we're a little bit more systematic about kind of moving it forward. Let me take a second just there to stop my share for a second and a little bit of an open conversation potentially. Are there any thoughts that anyone has up until this point? Oops, Sarah, I can't hear you, I'm afraid.
Hi, sorry, I had to join a bit late, but I just wanted to say that you may have already covered all these things, but as a parent, I've been so impressed with the leadership and vision that ASD has been showing going forward, and I just think it's terrific, and I think it's wonderful not only to connect the students with all these ideas, but also to bring in the parent body. So so I'm just letting you know that I'm interested, I'm here, and we'll see where we can go from here. But I think it's been terrific. Yeah.
Super. Thank you so much. I appreciate the feedback. And I think one of the strengths of the school and the community is that we do talk to each other. And they say it takes a village. So we're certainly all village. Anyone else have any thoughts? Too early in the morning, I guess. Okay, no worries. I'll just continue. If you have any questions or anything you want to share, of course, feel free to do that in the chat. And at some point, we will have what looks to be maybe a couple breakout rooms, and I'll give you a little sort of project to do, so to speak, in real time, and I'll explain how that works in just a couple seconds as well. So let me go back to my my screen sharing here, and move down to the next one. So this here is just images. I'm a big visual kind of person, and the truth is I always try to find images that might kind of share characteristics. So in this particular case, it's multiple images of classifications of sustainability that have been used by various organizations around the world. And I think the reason I like them is that often those 17 pieces, like I said, are not separate, but they're combined somehow. They have a relationship between them. So the one on the left, for example, has actual visible like puzzle piece connectors, and they go together. The other one in the middle is more of a, I think it's representational of the fact that really the biosphere is what keeps everything going, right? So the natural state of the world is what everything else is based on. But we often don't think that way as humans. We typically flip that actually. And so a lot of our decisions are based on that economy piece, which is right at the top. And we neglect sometimes to recognize that the economy is actually a subset of the social situation, and the society exists within kind of the limits and confines and processes and systems of the biological one. That is very similar also in nature to the top right one. It's very similar. So economy is within society, society is within nature. And then the one on the bottom right is probably the one that's typically used when sustainability is discussed. So you have an environment, you have a social, and you have an economic kind of circle. And they have overlaps. But I think the important thing for me to talk about is that these overlaps, these groupings, these connections are really what's important, regardless of what you call the category. It's the connections that really matter, because as we start talking about the school in particular, we want to make sure that those connections are kind of addressed, so to speak. So at our particular school, we use what we call kind of four system conditions for sustainability. So we have four categories, and I'll explain those four categories in just a second. But the four categories allow us to look at whatever it is, whether it's a topic, an issue. So in a classroom, for example, we might be talking about, I don't know, overpopulation, for example. And so we put overpopulation down, and we think about overpopulation in terms of what its cause effect relationships might be to the natural world, so the environment, to the economic situation. So obviously overpopulation will have, pressures put on the working conditions, on the working opportunities, on the economy in general. And it could be positive or it could be negative. The third bit is kind of the social dynamic. And when we talk about the social dynamic, we include things like ethnicity and culture. We include things like language. We include things like differences and diversity and racial differences and similarities and all those kind of dynamics on a larger kind of human social scale. And then the final piece that we use, which is a little bit different from what a lot of these external kind of international organizations do, is that we also have a personal piece, and we call that well-being. So the compass, which is what I want to talk just for a couple seconds, just so we can kind of look at things in a different way, is a figurative kind of topic, but we actually use this as an activity in class, for example. We will not be using it today, but I wanted to make sure that when we talk about sustainability, that you realize kind of the larger dynamics that are involved. So again, if we were to throw overpopulation here as a topic, or talk about anything, we could talk about, we've done this with a PTSA a couple years ago, and we did it on school events. I think it was the carnival at the time that we were compassing, and we were looking at the carnival specifically through these lenses. And so the idea is, let me go back to overpopulation because I don't want to stress anybody out, but so overpopulation, what relationship would it have to nature in any way, shape, or form? So overpopulation might lead to increased use of resources, for example, or something like that. On the economy side, of course, what economic effects would it have? On the societal side, what effects would it have? And then on the side of well-being, again, well-being is focused on the individual rather than the group. And that's how it's separated a little bit from society and well-being. So when we talk today in our next little activity, I would like for you all to think about these four lenses, if you don't mind. So nature, economy, society, and well-being are kind of the four categorizations. Again, just very briefly, the sustainability bit that we were talking about, and now we're trying to put the sustainability idea of not too much but enough into that kind of lens, and we move from there. The other piece that I wanted to point out, and this is critical in our little activity, again in a few minutes, is that you need to look at things in order to kind of broaden your own perspective. You need to look at things from multiple perspectives. And I've just offered the four that we were talking about. So nature, society, economy, and well-being are the ones that we typically use. But again, it could be anything really. It's just a matter of there are different perspectives. And I think this opens your mind to things like empathy that were brought up before. In the personal kind of core values. The second piece is the interconnections piece, which I think is hugely, hugely important, and especially for the students, but us today as well. Those connections need to be seen because there are a lot of times what they call unintended consequences. So for example, the KHDA, because of the COVID, decided that we could not use our water fountains. So the unintended consequence of that has been a massive increase of plastic water bottles that are either half finished or not even used, that are sitting in different rooms. And so, of course, KHDA and the Department of Health didn't make that decision thinking about the environment. They made the decision purely based on that well-being section of the compass. So it's our task sort of as a group here, but also as a school, to recognize that there are sometimes unintended consequences and to try to minimize those things. And that is what leads to kind of this systems thinking piece. How does one lead to another, and what are the relationships between them? And then finally, that other piece, which is the most good, least harm. We live in a globalized society. Whether we like it or not, we are basically in Dubai, most of us at least, because of that globalized society. The school represents the globalized society. And so it represents all the things that are beautiful and all the things that are terrible about globalization. And so it's our job really to think about, okay, anything we do will probably have a negative impact, but also everything we do will probably have a positive impact. And let's try to balance that out so it's mostly good and as less negative as we can make it. So really our mindset is like that. And the last little bit before we go into our little activity is for us, sustainability goes everywhere. So this goes back to the conversation we had a little bit before about, we're trying to generate an ethos, and it does take a village, and we are all in this because it can't be, one group of kids, for example, the eco club or whatever, doing everything for an entire community. And it's great that there is an eco club. In our particular case, we have kind of sustainability related student organizations at elementary, at middle school and high school. At high school, we have probably 4 that all focus on different things, which is nice. And we have an Eco Schools program organization as well, which is a K-12 community-wide. So the kids are doing actually really well in terms of trying to infuse sustainability. The teachers are working on this in terms of putting it into the curriculum. I guess the highlight being the Global Issues in Action class in grade 9, which really focuses a lot on this. So the kids in the class will do that actual compass activity, for example, while they try to analyze the global issues. But it's also important that we have it programmatically set, sort of in the structures that we have behavioral expectations of our community and our campus in general as a school, that the buildings themselves are sustainable or as sustainable as we can make them, the process, the water use, all those things that I think were mentioned earlier in the resources category. And then also that the people themselves are involved, and you as parents become one of that kind of subgroup of people who really need to be on board and have these conversations. So that's why I'm very excited that we're starting today, let's say, and kind of moving forward. So parents have been part of the conversations, but what we are hoping is that we make this a little bit more meaningful and purposeful. So rather than this just be informational, here's what the school is doing, you're the parent, you get to listen, we're actually inviting the parents to the conversation, because really this isn't about algebra or calculus or the War of 1812 or anything like that. It's not content based. This is about really shifting to a bigger why. And I think when we're talking about the school's mission and we want kids to to engage and contribute in a rapidly changing world. And the world is changing way faster than we were prepared to change with it. So it really comes down to everything those kids do. So they're in a psychology class, they're in a math class, they're in a PE class. All of that really needs to be for a positive future. And so for me, this sustainability conversation is all about that. How do we build the skills? How do we create the community? How do we become the example for a sustainable world that these kids can then say, you know what, if we could do it at ASD, we can do it worldwide. And the same goes with us. So if we can be examples for that, then for sure we can work. So very quickly, where are we now? We are at a point where we're pretty excited about what we've done and what we've accomplished. I don't know if you had the opportunity to look at this video. This video was shared a couple days ago, and I'm going to press play. Can everybody see the video? Or you can see it on my screen. Hopefully the sound works as well. So it's 5 minutes, so kind of bear with me for a second. But this is a nice little highlight of what we do, partly in my office, but across the school. With regard specifically to the SDGs. I don't know if you're all in the social media of the school, but this was shared yesterday or 2 days ago, specifically related to the global goals. So let me press play real quick, and we'll go from there. Welcome to the Changemaker Hub. Come inside. So one of our tasks at the American School of Dubai is to focus on the mission statement. And part of the mission statement talks about contributing to a rapidly changing world. So what the world actually looks like is very, very different from when we were children. The Sustainable Development Goals for us offers a framework for global citizenship, which is in the end part of our new student profile. Right, so part of our work at the Changemaker Hub is to liaison with teachers so that we can embed curricular development and we can expand the learning of students through the use of service learning, or through the focus on sustainability, or through talking about and developing the skills and aptitudes necessary to become global citizens. And we do that through the Sustainable Development Goals.
In grade 2, we focus on SDG 2, which is about zero hunger and food security. And we do that through our grade level service learning project, which is all about protected pollinators. So the grade 2 students work a lot with our beehives here on campus for grade 2 honors and participates in World Food Day by planting flowers and plants for the bees so that they have enough pollen. And then the bees help to pollinate the food that we need so that as humans, we have enough food too. Okay, so our service learning project has created a lot of buzz on campus. Families, students in different grade levels are really excited about what we're doing. We're also having different faculty members and community members more involved in our beehives here. So we're seeing things across the grade levels. But also what happens is the students that participate in our service learning project really have that global citizen mentality. And they learn about identifying problems in the world around them. And they also know how to take action, informed action, which is the most important thing. So we'll have students coming back and sharing new research that they found through the library or new projects that they're starting, or they're talking about how they're inspiring their family to have more plants in their backyard and to make more sustainable choices.
We infuse and investigate the UN Sustainable Development Goals into projects. We create opportunities such as project pathways guided by student choice and interest. Students soon will design a virtual 3D sustainable city using the SDGs. We try our best to use environmentally friendly materials with a sustainable life cycle. We have special equipment like the precious plastic equipment to inspire and create an experience of sustainable product design. I want to develop or create a nature lab and library for our students to explore these natural materials and have more of a dialogue among students and teachers in the community around biodesign, material ecology, and these products of the future and how we're designing them. So this is just the beginning of the year, school year for us. And as we make our way through, I believe we'll come out more innovative and resilient than ever.
Our course is largely rooted in the United Nations Global Goals. On a daily basis, we are investigating the global goals. We are applying them to different news articles that we're reading and videos we're watching. A lot of our research projects are embedded in the global goals. Students will be researching change makers around the world and the things that they're undertaking in order to address some of the world's most pressing problems. And lastly, a lot of the hands-on activities that we undertake throughout the year, such as our visits to ASD's garden, cooking class in the kitchen here at ASD, and our visit to the beehives on campus are largely linked to many of the goals, including climate action, life on land, and well-being.
In order for the world to be a better place, people should not waste.
We need more available education.
People need to plant and protect forests.
All food and medication should be free to everyone.
We have to give food to people who can't pay for it.
We need to change systems.
We need to be able to stop racism.
In order for the world to be a better place, everybody needs access to food and water.
To take care of animals.
To make the world a better place, we need to have a more plant-based diet.
There needs to be respect between everyone. Things need to be built in a sustainable way.
To make the world a better place, we need to.
Everyone needs to get along.
In order for the world to be a better place, people need to be kind.
I think I'll stop it right there. All right. Again, maybe a minute or so. Anyone have any thoughts they would like to share just based on either the video or the conversation so far?
I think it's great the way they have really internalized these goals and brought them to life in creative ways. I think they're really clear to the kids what they mean, what they represent. It's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to add to that it was great to see those children in elementary school really having those goals embedded in what they're learning. I think that's terrific, and we could see how it then moves forward to the families, to the community, and starting at such a young age is just fabulous. And ASD is in this wonderful position where they have this, campus with beehives and parents who are interested in a certain amount of financial security that they can develop these things. So it's so impressive to see what's happened so far, and it's inspiring to think about where we can go from here.
Thank you. Okay, and speaking, maybe that's a good segue to the next little bit here. Jinsey, are you still around? Sorry, we need a little bit of tech backup for this next little section. I will be walking through, no. Sorry, let me share again. Keep having to work out this share screen, don't share screen. Okay, so I think I'm sharing again. Hopefully everybody can see. I'm going to skip through just a little bit. So I wanted to share with everybody. So we have our accreditation program is through the MSA, which is the Middle States Association of Schools and Colleges, I think. And one of our requirements last year during the accreditation visit was the creation of an organizational capacity goal. So this isn't necessarily a learning goal. So we're not focused specifically on student learning or testing or anything like that, but we are focusing on the community. And so we have 3 goals or sub goals, I guess, based on sustainability. And I'll focus on the second and third one first, and I guess I should have written them the other way around. So one of them is the reduction of energy use from 2 years ago. So last year was the visit, so the baseline was 2 years ago. And the idea is that we are going to be using, by 2027, 50% less energy from the grid specifically. So the idea partly would be focusing on energy efficiency, and partly would be focused on actually identifying and supporting alternative energies. And solar, I guess, is our low-hanging fruit potentially, since we've already begun with that. The second piece is an 80% reduction in food waste headed to landfill. The truth is we came up on 80 because we felt 100 was probably a little bit too lofty, but the actual goal is 100, so that all waste from food or any biodegradable waste gets put in our industrial composter. In fact, we have a composter that's more capable than all the food that we produce. So we're talking about creating relationships with community restaurants so that they can give us their extra food waste so that that can go into the composter as well. And then the last one, which is I guess the first one written here, is that based on the sustainable development goals you just heard, we want to engage our community so that in a what would it be, like self-reflective kind of way, people can think about their own personal behaviors and identify at least, or 75% of them will have identified at least one way that they were able to help, with sustainability in general. Now that's a lot broader and a lot maybe fluffier. And so part of what we're talking about today potentially is how do we actually engage that piece and how do we move forward? So I wanted, if possible, to focus a little bit on what we're calling the iceberg model. And so the iceberg model it's a systems thinking tool that you may have seen before, but the idea is that we're focused on different levels of what we do and what our community thinks and feels based on sustainability. So for example, an event, we could have an event being, I don't know, the creation of a bee garden. And so that's something that, of course, we can see. And so it's at the event level. And it could be a one-off event, or it can be like a pattern of behavior. So in our particular school, a pattern of behavior might be, well, we have increased number of sustainability sites and learning spaces. And then you start talking about the systems and structures. And the systems and structures have to do with, okay, what things are in place that will support those patterns? Do we have an organizational system that will allow those patterns to become a little bit more embedded? Do we have policies in place? Do we have expectations in place? Do we have personnel? Do we have budgets? All those kind of systems elements that will support a direction. And finally, the mental models is really a lot of these core values that you were talking about. So what is important to us as a community in terms of moving forward for sustainability? So you all mentioned, at least the ones who were here right at the beginning, what your kind of personal core values were. The idea is, what is it about our mindsets and our mental models that will support all this? What kind of people do we need to be? What kind of a community do we need to be so that really sustainability kind of grabs hold and moves forward? So the activity I would like to have you all participate in, and hopefully Jincy is around. Jincy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm here.
Okay. So I think based on the number of people, we probably want maybe 3 groups, if you don't mind. But before we get everybody in those groups, let me just copy and share the link for a second. And what I would like for everyone to do is the following. You will all be put in a room for about 10 minutes. So this isn't like a super long experience. I've just on the chat added a little Jamboard click. And what I want you guys to do is there should be 3 pages on that Jamboard. Please use the page that has the same number as your group. So if you're in group 1, use page 1. If you're in group 2, use page 2. If you're in group 3, use page 3. What you will find on those pages is literally an iceberg, just like the one I just described. And then space, open space, along with the question of what should sustainability look like at ASD. So this is a little bit more visionary. It's more a little bit like not what is it, but what should it be? And what direction do we want to go in? And your task for the next 10 minutes is to basically do a powwow and put any thoughts you might have at any one of those levels. So remember, again, the events are things that are seen. Like they're one-off events, they're posters, they're, signage, that kind of stuff. Recurring things are kind of a little bit more programmatic. Structures might include personnel, policies, budgets, those kind of things. And then the mental models is really what are we focusing on as far as a community ethos. There are no other rules to this other than just have fun, talk to each other, and feel free to put things on the table. And there are no bad ideas. So this is not a, oh, I hate that, take it off the table situation. We're literally just putting ideas down. Feel free to have a conversation as you're doing that, or feel free to just put stuff down and not talk to people. But in the end, it should be more of a conversational piece because conversation allows for the generation of new ideas to be established. So Jincy, if you don't mind, can you make 3 breakout groups, please, with roughly, 5 people or so in each? So I'm guessing we have maybe a couple more people coming in, but in the benefit of time, I wanted to take a little bit to kind of just debrief that. First of all, I realized when we were in the small groups that I hadn't actually talked about the sticky notes and how to actually take notes on the document. So I'm sorry if that confused people, but at the very least, even if there was a conversation regarding the iceberg, I think that would be a good starting point. So if you don't mind, why don't you tell me what thoughts came up in those chats?
Well, I was in group 2, and are we supposed to tell you here, Lawrence, or are we supposed to send you messages?
No, just a quick debrief of how.
Okay, yeah. So we had an interesting discussion, and if that's okay with the other group 2 members, I can just let everybody know what we spoke about. Anybody else can jump in. But some of the ideas that came up, well, one of the ideas that came up was it has to be sort of more holistic. Not has to be, but it would be great if it were sort of the whole understanding of the sustainable sort of larger picture was more holistic. In other words, one of our members talked about, signing a sustainability pledge or something that the parents and the students and everybody so everybody understands that ASD is fully committed to this, and it's not just pockets of the school, not just sort of a club here and a club there and people raising money for this, but rather a whole ethos that the school is committed to, and I thought that was an interesting idea. Also, we spoke about the importance of the reinforcing the whole idea of the connection to nature, and the idea that because sometimes when there's this disconnect, one of the members was saying when there's a disconnect between sort of a sustainability and nature and earth, then people don't get it the same way. But if we can reinforce that it's all coming back to the environment, that would be a helpful thing to reinforce. And then we talked about how important it would be for people to recognize that what happens at school could be reinforced at home, so that the parents are very much, or at least the family life reinforces what is going on at ASD. So those are just three things that I remember that came up from our discussion. There may be others that people want to add.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, anyone else want to add? I realize it's 9:30 already, so maybe just a quick closure, just a quick statement for each group. And what I'll do is I'll take any documentation that's still on that Jamboard and kind of use that as we move forward potentially. But anyone else have something they'd like to talk about in terms of debrief?
Yeah, so our group also talked about something similar. We felt like there were actually so many examples on campus of, beginning to affect behavior and the mentality and the system structure and all of that. And we talked about those examples and the fact that they're obvious, you see them, they're so, when you walk through our campus, you can see that our school is committed to these things. But how do we extend that into homes, into families? And sort of what's the next step of equipping kids to sort of bring those messages back home, and what are some things that we can begin to pledge to as families? The other thing, just sort of on the events piece, not sure what, events means, but just sort of in terms of tangible things to be involved in and make happen. We talked a bit about, really partnering with the community, both sort of in and out, sort of what kinds of things are happening already through our school that we can showcase to a broader community, so we can actually help spread the word, not only throughout our community, but beyond our community. And then also, what are the things happening in the community that we could become more involved in, and take advantage of? What are the events or things that are happening that, our kids could become part of? Because there are some innovative things that the UAE is promoting and doing with sustainability.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Nadine?
I just want, we didn't specifically discuss this, but I think that what we do at school in terms of the gardening, the cooking, and the sustainability goes hand in hand, and the bees, and it's amazing. And my second grader last year was just, she just loved it. And I know for sure that she's going to have this in her mind for years to come. And so it's starting them young. And I know that the school's already doing everything they can, but I think if we can find a way to further sort of entrench that in every grade level, on every aspect of their learning, that is something that they will just take with them for life. And that's how you change the world, by educating the young kids. So I think I would certainly be happy to help school implement more of that.
And I think that might be a good way to maybe create a little bit of closure, just to respect everyone's time. The fact that mental model sits at the bottom, for me, speaks volumes to the need for a focus on education. And so a part of that is, of course, the conversation we're having right now. But of course, part of it is the more formal, curricular integration, curricular development. And we're certainly working on that, but you're right. Right now it's kind of patchy. And what we're hoping to do is kind of streamline the process a little bit. And so your input today and your participation has been invaluable, I think, just in terms of data collection. Just so you all know, I know some of you are kind of already signed up for that little committee, but some might not be. So there is a PTSA committee specifically on sustainability, several people of whom are here today, that we're hoping to kind of create maybe a once a month kind of check-in to see at the parent level, what can be done. And I like the connection that several of you made to the home, right? So yeah, okay, at the school we're doing XYZ. How do we get that to really come into the homes? And I think a lot of times the little kids are the teachers, right? So they'll come from school and they'll talk about the pollinators, for example. And so they become the teachers of the families, because our generation missed the learning. All right, we just started the waste, for example, and plastics appeared one day and we just started using them because they were really convenient, and there was a disconnect between what was happening and the education that really needs to be done. So that we're a little bit playing catch up now, but certainly it starts with a small committed group of people, and a lot of you are, and I really appreciate that. So thank you so much for your time today. It's really nice seeing so many beautiful people in one space, and your feedback and input is hugely valuable. And I hope this just continues through this committee. And so if you're interested in that, please let me know, and I can forward that to the PTSA as well. All right, thank you very, very much. Have a nice day. Take care.